THE FABLE OF WHY SWEETY FLEW THE TRACK. From More Fables by George Ade. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Bill Moseley. The Fable of Why Sweety Flew the Track by George Ade. Once there were two married people who used Lovey and Pet when they were in company, and as soon as they were at home they threw things at each other. She used to watch him through a hole in the curtain to see if he flirted with any women as he walked up the street, and he bribed the hired girl to tell him everything that happened while he was off the reservation. They did not Mocha and Java worth a cent. The cardboard motto in the dining room said, "Love one another," but they were too busy to read. He had a clearing on the top of his head and wore side whiskers, and bore a general resemblance to the Before in an ad for a facial treatment, and yet she suspected that all the women in town were crazy to steal him away from her. Likewise, inasmuch as she was the same width all the way up and down, the same as a poster girl, and used to sport a velvet shroud with black beads on it, and could wield a toothpick and carry on a conversation at the same time, he knew that sooner or later some handsome wretch with money would try to abduct her. Sometimes he would bring a friend home to dinner, and then if the friend extended himself and told the missus how well she was looking, or perjured himself over her hand painting, Papa would get a grouch and hide in the corner. Then she would fan herself rapidly and ask, "Aren't you well, dear?" Dear would force one of those dying martyr smiles, and reply, "I am quite well, Puss." Then Puss would tell the visitor that Baby was simply ruining his health through devotion to his employers, but they didn't seem to appreciate him at all. After the visitor went away there would be language all over the shop, and the poor hired girl would lock the door and write to the intelligence office for a new place. Truly, it was a happy little home with the reverse English. She would frisk his wardrobe every day or two, looking for evidence, and he would compel her to itemize her accounts, so that he might be sure she was not giving jewelry to the iceman. She would find a certain passage in a book relating to man's cruelty and woman's silent suffering, and then she would mark the passage and put it where he could find it. Then, when he found it, he would mark it "Rot" and put it where she could find it, and then she would weep and write letters to lady authors telling them how sad and lonely she was. But all the time they kept up an affectionate front before their acquaintances. They thought it better to avoid scenes in public, and although each knew that the other was false and had ceased to love, they could not bring themselves to think of a separation or a divorce on account of the cat. Their cat. The cat must never know. However, one of his business associates was on. He was a bachelor, and had lived at a European hotel for years, and he knew just how to arbitrate a domestic scrap. So he sat down one day and gave the husband a good talking to. He said it was a shame that such nice people should have their differences when it was so easy to be happy. With that he handed over a slew of platitudes and proverbs, such as "A soft answer turneth away wrath," "It takes two to make a quarrel," "Think twice before you speak once," etc. The gist of this heart-to-heart talk was that any husband could stop rough-house proceedings and shoot all kinds of sweetness and light into the sassiest mooch a wife ever got on to herself, if only he would refuse to quarrel with her, receive her flings without a show of wrath, and get up every morning ready to plug for a renaissance of their early love. Oh, but it was a beauty bright system. The European Hotel bachelor said it couldn't lose. The husband decided to give it a trial. That very afternoon he met his wife, who had come out in her long fawn-colored coat that fell straight in the back. She had her upper rigging set, and was trying to blanket everything on the street. He flashed a smiling countenance, and said he was glad to see her. Then, instead of asking her when she left the house, and where she had been since then, and how soon she expected to go home again, he told her she was looking unusually charming. She was startled. He handed her a 10 and told her to have a good time. Now, usually, when she wanted any pin money, she had to pry it out of him. On her way home, her mind was in a tumult. Why had he given her the Cannes speech and all that money? What was the ulterior motive? What had he been doing that he should attempt to coddle her into a forgiving mood? Did he fear that she would get next to his past? Huh? He just couldn't fool her. She knew something was doing. Else, why should he try to fix her? As soon as he came home that evening, she accused him and said she knew all. Instead of countering with the usual jibe, he told her that she was the only woman he had ever loved, and would she go to a show that evening? She went, thinking that perhaps the other woman might be there, and she could detect some signal passing between them. While at the theater, he fanned her and explained the plot, and was all attention. They rode home in a cab because he said a car wasn't good enough for his queen. After they were at home, he asked her to sing the song he had liked so much in the old days, "My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean." This was conclusive proof to her that the hussy's name was Bonnie. Next morning, before he started away, he kissed her, and it wasn't any make-believe such as you see in comic opera. It was a genuine Olga Nethersoll buss, full of linger and adhesion. To cap the climax, he said he would stop in and order some violets. As soon as the door slammed, she staggered toward the kitchen, holding on to the furniture here and there, the same as a Sardou heroine. In the kitchen was a box of Rough-on-Rats. Hastily concealing it beneath the loose folds of her morning gown, she went to her room and looked in the mirror. Ah, when he saw that cold, white face, then he would be sorry. Upon second thought, this didn't seem to be a moral certainty. So she weakened and had the girl take the poison and hide it. She said she would live to forget his perfidy. That day she went back to Mamma and took the cat with her. When he came home in the twilight he found no wife, no cat, only a scribbled note saying that he could no longer deceive her, that she had seen through his diabolical plan to lull her suspicions, and that she was no longer safe in the same house. When the deserted husband went to the friend and told him what had happened, the wise bachelor said, "I see you did not go at her strong enough." Moral: they don't know anything about it. End of The Fable of Why Sweetie Flew the Track, by George Ade. Recording by Bill Moseley, Frellsburg, Texas, USA.
The Four Kinds of Love by Abdul Baha Abbas, from Talks by Abdul Baha given in Paris, translated by Lady Sarah Louisa Blomfield. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are on the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Four Kinds of Love, 97, Cadogan Gardens, London, Saturday, January 4th, 1913. What a power is love! It is the most wonderful, the greatest of all living powers. Love gives life to the lifeless. Love lights a flame in the heart that is cold. Love brings hope to the hopeless and gladdens the hearts of the sorrowful. In the world of existence there is indeed no greater power than the power of love. When the heart of man is aglow with the flame of love, he is ready to sacrifice all, even his life. In the Gospel it is said, God is love. There are four kinds of love. The first is the love that flows from God to man. It consists of the inexhaustible graces, the divine effulgence and heavenly illumination. Through this love the world of being receives life. Through this love man is endowed with physical existence until, through the breath of the Holy Spirit, this same love, he receives eternal life and becomes the image of the living God. This love is the origin of all the love in the world of creation. The second is the love that flows from man to God. This is faith, attraction to the divine, enkindlement, progress, entrance into the kingdom of God, receiving the bounties of God, illumination with the lights of the kingdom. This love is the origin of all philanthropy. This love causes the hearts of men to reflect the rays of the Sun of Reality. The third is the love of God towards the self or identity of God. This is the transfiguration of His beauty, the reflection of Himself in the mirror of His creation. This is the reality of love, the ancient love, the eternal love. Through one ray of this love all other love exists. The fourth is the love of man for man. The love which exists between the hearts of believers is prompted by the ideal of the unity of spirits. This love is attained through the knowledge of God, so that men may see the divine love reflected in the heart. Each sees in the other the beauty of God reflected in the soul, and finding this point of similarity, they are attracted to one another in love. This love will make all men the waves of one sea. This love will make them all the stars of one heaven and the fruits of one tree. This love will bring the realization of true accord, the foundation of real unity. But the love which sometimes exists between friends is not true love, because it is subject to transmutation. This is merely fascination. As the breeze blows, the slender trees yield. If the wind is in the east, the tree leans to the west, and if the wind turns to the west, the tree leans to the east. This kind of love is originated by the accidental conditions of life. This is not love, it is merely acquaintanceship. It is subject to change. Today you will see two souls apparently in close friendship. Tomorrow all this may be changed. Yesterday they were ready to die for one another. Today they shun one another's society. This is not love, it is the yielding of the hearts to the accidents of life. When that which has caused this love to exist passes, the love passes also. This is not in reality love. Love is only of the four kinds I have explained. A. The love of God towards the identity of God. Christ has said, God is love. B. The love of God for His children, for His servants. C. The love of man for God, and D. The love of man for man. These four kinds of love originate from God. These are rays from the Sun of Reality. These are the breathings of the Holy Spirit. These are the signs of the Reality. End of The Four Kinds of Love by Abdul Baha Abbas. Read by Nicholas James Bridgewater.
A Haunted House by Virginia Woolf, for Monday or Tuesday. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For further information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Whatever hour you woke, there was a door shutting. From room to room they went, hand in hand, lifting here, opening there, making sure. A ghostly couple. "Here we left it," she said, and he added, "Oh, but here too!" "It's upstairs," she murmured. "And in the garden," he whispered. "Quietly," they said, "or we shall wake them." "But it wasn't that you woke us. Oh no. They're looking for it. They're drawing the curtain, one might say, and so read on a page or two. Now they've found it. One would be certain, stopping the pencil on the margin, and then, tired of reading, one might rise and see for oneself the house all empty, the door standing open, only the wood pigeons bubbling with content and the hum of the threshing machine sounding through the farm. What did I come in here for? What did I want to find? My hands were empty. Perhaps it's upstairs then. The apples were in the loft. And so down again, the garden still as ever, only the book had slipped into the grass. But they had found it in the drawing-room. Not that one could ever see them. The window panes reflected apples, reflected roses, all the leaves were green in the glass. If they moved in the drawing-room, the apple only turned its yellow side. Yet, the moment after, If the door was opened, spread about the floor, hung upon the walls, pendant from the ceiling, what? My hands were empty. The shadow of a thrush crossed the carpet. From the deepest wells of silence the wood pigeon drew its bubble of sound. Safe, safe, safe. The pulse of the house beat softly. The treasure buried, the room. The pulse stopped short. Oh, was that the buried treasure? A moment later the light had faded. Out in the garden, then! But the trees spun darkness for a wandering beam of sun, so fine, so rare, coolly sunk beneath the surface the beam I sought always burnt behind the glass. Death was the glass, death was between us, coming to the woman first, hundreds of years ago. Leaving the house, sealing all the windows, the rooms were darkened. He left it, left her, went north, went east, saw the stars turned in the southern sky, sought the house, found it dropped beneath the downs. Safe, safe, safe. The pulse of the house beat gladly. The treasure yours! The wind roars up the avenue. Trees stoop and bend this way and that. Moonbeams splash and spill wildly in the rain. But the beam of the lamp falls straight from the window. The candle burns stiff and still. Wandering through the house, opening the windows, whispering not to wake us, the ghost couples seek their joy. Here we slept, she says, and he adds, kisses without number. Waking in the morning, silver between the trees. Upstairs, in the garden. When summer came, in winter snow time, the doors go shutting far in the distance, gently knocking like the pulse of a heart. Nearer they came, cease at the doorway. The wind falls, the rain slides silver down the glass. Our eyes darken. We hear no steps beside us. We see no lady spread her ghostly cloak. His hands shield the lantern. Look, he breathes, sound asleep, love upon their lips. Stooping, holding the silver lamp above us, long they look and deeply, long they pause. The wind drives straightly, the flame stoops slightly. Wild beams of moonlight cross both floor and wall, and, meeting, stain the faces bent, the faces pondering, the faces that search the sleepers and seek their hidden joy. Safe, safe, safe! The heart of the house beats proudly. Long years, he sighs. Again you found me. Here, she murmurs, sleeping, in the garden reading, laughing, rolling the apples in the loft. Here we left our treasure. Stooping, their light lifts the lids upon my eyes. Safe, safe, safe! The pulse of the house beats wildly. Waking, I cry, oh, is this your buried treasure? The light in the heart. End of A Haunted House by Virginia Woolf. Recorded by Mary Beth Blackburn at goldawardadventures.blogspot.com.
Hearts and Hands by O. Henry, read by Aparna Vishwanatham. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Hearts and Hands. At Denver, there was an influx of passengers into the coaches on the eastbound B&M Express. In one coach, there sat a very pretty young woman, dressed in elegant taste and surrounded by all the luxurious comforts of an experienced traveler. Among the newcomers were two young men, one of handsome presence with a bold, frank countenance and manner, the other a ruffled, glum-faced person, heavily built and roughly dressed. The two were handcuffed together. As they passed down the aisle of the coach, the only vacant seat offered was a reversed one facing the attractive young woman. Here the linked couple seated themselves. The young woman's glance fell upon them with a distant, swift disinterest. Then, with a lovely smile brightening her countenance and a tender pink tingeing her rounded cheeks, she held out a little grey-gloved hand. When she spoke, her voice, full, sweet, and deliberate, proclaimed that its owner was accustomed to speak and be heard. "Well, Mr. Easton, if you will make me speak first, I suppose I must. Don't you ever recognize old friends when you meet them in the West?" The young man roused himself sharply at the sound of her voice, seemed to struggle with a slight embarrassment, which he threw off instantly, and then clasped her fingers with his left hand. "It's Miss Fairchild," he said with a smile. "I'll ask you to excuse the other hand. It's otherwise engaged just at present." He slightly raised his right hand, bound at the wrist by the shining bracelet, to the left one of his companion. The glad look in the girl's eyes slowly changed to a bewildered horror. The glow faded from her cheeks. Her lips parted in a vague, relaxing distress. Easton, with a little laugh as if amused, was about to speak again when the other forestalled him. The glum-faced man had been watching the girl's countenance with veiled glances from his keen, shrewd eyes. "You'll excuse me for speaking, miss, but I see you're acquainted with the marshal here. If you'll ask him to speak a word for me when we get to the pen, he'll do it, and it'll make things easier for me there. He's taking me to Leavenworth prison. It's 7 years for counterfeiting." "Oh," said the girl, with a deep breath and returning colour, "so that is what you're doing out here, a marshal." "My dear Miss Fairchild," said Easton calmly, "I had to do something. Money has a way of taking wings unto itself, and you know it takes money to keep step with our crowd in Washington. I saw this opening in the West, and, well, a marshalship isn't quite as high as a position as that of an ambassador, but—" "The ambassador," said the girl warmly, "doesn't call any more. He needn't ever have done so. You ought to know that. And so now you're one of these dashing Western heroes, and you ride and shoot and go into all kinds of dangers. That's different from the Washington life. You have been missed from the old crowd." The girl's eyes, fascinated, went back, widening a little to rest upon the glittering handcuffs. "Don't you worry about them, miss," said the other man. "All marshals handcuff themselves to their prisoners to keep them from getting away. Mr. Easton knows his business." "Will we see you again soon in Washington?" asked the girl. "Not soon, I think," said Easton. "My butterfly days are over, I fear." "I love the West," said the girl irrelevantly. Her eyes were shining softly. She looked away out the car window. She began to speak truly and simply, without the gloss of style and manner. "Mamma and I spent the summer in Denver. She went home a week ago because father was slightly ill. I could live and be happy in the West. I think the air here agrees with me. Money isn't everything, but people always misunderstand things and remain stupid." "Say, Mr. Marshall," growled the glum-faced man, "this isn't quite fair. I'm needing a drink, and haven't had a smoke all day. Haven't you talked long enough? Take me in the smoker now, won't you? I'm half dead for a pipe." The bound travellers rose to their feet, Easton with the same slow smile on his face. "I can't deny a petition for tobacco," he said lightly. "It's the one friend of the unfortunate. Good-bye, Miss Fairchild. Duty calls, you know." He held out his hand for a farewell. "It's too bad you're not going east," she said, reclothing herself with manner and style. "But you must go on to Leavenworth, I suppose?" "Yes," said Easton, "I must go on to Leavenworth." The two men sidled down the aisle into the smoker. Two passengers in a seat nearby had heard most of the conversation. Said one of them, "That marshal's a good sort of chap. Some of these Western fellows are all right." "Pretty young to hold an office like that, isn't he?" asked the other. "Young?" exclaimed the first speaker. "Why, oh, didn't you catch on? Say, did you ever know an officer to handcuff a prisoner to his right hand?" End of Hearts and Hands by O. Henry. Read by Aparna Vishwanatham.
The Husband by Anton Chekhov. From The Tales of Chekhov, Volume 3, The Lady with the Dog and Other Stories by Anton Chekhov. Translated by Constance Garnett. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Husband. In the course of the maneuvers, the N Cavalry Regiment halted for a night at the district town of K. Such an event as the visit of officers always has the most exciting and inspiring effect on the inhabitants of provincial towns. The shopkeepers dream of getting rid of the rusty sausages and best brand sardines that have been lying for 10 years on their shelves. The inns and restaurants keep open all night. The military commandant, his secretary, and the local garrison put on their best uniforms. The police flit to and fro like mad, while the effect on the ladies is beyond all description. The ladies of K., hearing the regiment approaching, forsook their pans of boiling jam and ran into the street. Forgetting their morning déshabille and general untidiness, they rushed, breathless with excitement, to meet the regiment, and listened greedily to the band playing the march. Looking at their pale, ecstatic faces, one might have thought those strains came from some heavenly choir rather than from a military brass band. "The regiment!" they cried joyfully. "The regiment is coming!" What could this unknown regiment that came by chance today and would depart at dawn tomorrow mean to them? Afterwards, when the officers were standing in the middle of the square, and with their hands behind them discussing the question of billets, all the ladies were gathered together at the examining magistrate's, and vying with one another in their criticism of the regiment. They already knew, goodness knows how, that the colonel was married but not living with his wife, that the senior officer's wife had a baby born dead every year, that the adjutant was hopelessly in love with some countess, and had even once attempted suicide. They knew everything. When a pock-marked soldier in a red shirt darted past the windows, they knew for certain that it was Lieutenant Rymzov's orderly running about the town trying to get some English bitter ale on tick for his master. They had only caught a passing glimpse of the officers' backs, but had already decided that there was not one handsome or interesting man among them. Having talked to their heart's content, they sent for the military commandant and the committee of the club, and instructed them at all costs to make arrangements for a dance. Their wishes were carried out. At 9 o'clock in the evening, the military band was playing in the street before the club, while in the club itself the officers were dancing with the ladies of K. The ladies felt as though they were on wings. Intoxicated by the dancing, the music, and the clank of spurs, they threw themselves, heart and soul, into making the acquaintance of their new partners, and quite forgot their old civilian friends. Their fathers and husbands, forced temporarily into the background, crowded round the meager refreshment table in the entrance hall. All these government cashiers, secretaries, clerks, and superintendents, stale, sickly-looking, clumsy figures, were perfectly well aware of their inferiority. They did not even enter the ballroom, but contented themselves with watching their wives and daughters in the distance dancing with the accomplished and graceful officers. Among the husbands was Shalikov, the tax collector, a narrow, spiteful soul, given to drink, with a big, closely cropped head, and thick, protruding lips. He had had a university education. There had been a time when he used to read progressive literature and sing student songs, but now, as he said of himself, he was a tax collector and nothing more. He stood leaning against the doorpost, his eyes fixed on his wife, Anna Pavlovna, a little brunette of 30, with a long nose and a pointed chin, tightly laced, with her face carefully powdered. She danced without pausing for breath, danced till she was ready to drop exhausted. But though she was exhausted in body, her spirit was inexhaustible. One could see as she danced that her thoughts were with the past, that far-away past when she used to dance at the College for Young Ladies, dreaming of a life of luxury and gaiety, and never doubting that her husband was to be a prince, or at the worst a baron. The tax collector watched, scowling with spite. It was not jealousy he was feeling. He was ill-humored. First, because the room was taken up with dancing, and there was nowhere he could play a game of cards. Secondly, because he could not endure the sound of wind instruments. And thirdly, because he fancied the officers treated the civilians somewhat too casually and disdainfully. But what, above everything, revolted him and moved him to indignation was the expression of happiness on his wife's face. "It makes me sick to look at her," he muttered. "Going on for 40, and nothing to boast of at any time, and she must powder her face and lace herself up, and frizzing her hair, flirting and making faces, and fancying she's doing the thing in style. Ugh! You're a pretty figure, upon my soul!" Anna Pavlovna was so lost in the dance that she did not once glance at her husband. "Of course not. Where do we poor country bumpkins come in?" sneered the tax collector. "We are at a discount now. We're clumsy seals, unpolished provincial bears, and she's the queen of the ball. She has kept enough of her looks to please even officers. They'd not object to making love to her, I dare say." During the mazurka the tax collector's face twitched with spite. A black-haired officer with prominent eyes and Tartar cheekbones danced the mazurka with Anna Pavlovna, assuming a stern expression. He worked his legs with gravity and feeling, and so crooked his knees that he looked like a jack-a-dandy pulled by strings, while Anna Pavlovna, pale and thrilled, bending her figure languidly and turning her eyes up, tried to look as though she scarcely touched the floor, and evidently felt herself that she was not on earth, not at the local club, but somewhere far, far away in the clouds. Not only her face, but her whole figure was expressive of beatitude. The tax collector could endure it no longer. He felt a desire to jeer at that beatitude, to make Anna Pavlovna feel that she had forgotten herself, that life was by no means so delightful as she fancied now in her excitement. "You wait. I'll teach you to smile so blissfully," he muttered. "You are not a boarding school miss. You are not a girl. An old fright ought to realize she is a fright." Petty feelings of envy, vexation, wounded vanity, of that small provincial misanthropy engendered in petty officials by vodka and a sedentary life, swarmed in his heart like mice. Waiting for the end of the mazurka, he went into the hall and walked up to his wife. Anna Pavlovna was sitting with her partner, and flirting her fan, and coquettishly dropping her eyelids, was describing how she used to dance in Petersburg. Her lips were pursed up like a rosebud, and she pronounced, "At home in Petersburg." "Anyuta, let us go home," croaked the tax collector. Seeing her husband standing before her, Anna Pavlovna started as though recalling the fact that she had a husband. Then she flushed all over. She felt ashamed that she had such a sickly-looking, ill-humored, ordinary husband. "Let us go home," repeated the tax collector. "Why, it's quite early." "I beg you to come home," said the tax collector deliberately, with a spiteful expression. "Why, has anything happened?" Anna Pavlovna asked in a flutter. Nothing has happened, but I wish you to go home at once. I wish it, that's enough, and without further talk, please." Anna Pavlovna was not afraid of her husband, but she felt ashamed on account of her partner, who was looking at her husband with surprise and amusement. She got up and moved a little apart with her husband. "What notion is this?" she began. "Why go home? Why, it's not 11 o'clock." "I wish it, and that's enough. Come along, and that's all about it." "Don't be silly. Go home alone if you want to." "All right, then I shall make a scene." The tax collector saw the look of beatitude gradually vanish from his wife's face, saw how ashamed and miserable she was, and he felt a little happier. "Why do you want me at once?" asked his wife. "I don't want you, but I wish you to be at home. I wish it, that's all." At first Anna Pavlovna refused to hear of it. Then she began entreating her husband to let her stay just another half hour. Then, without knowing why, she began to apologize, to protest, and all in a whisper, with a smile that the spectators might not suspect that she was having a tiff with her husband. She began assuring him she would not stay long, only another 10 minutes, only 5 minutes. But the tax collector stuck obstinately to his point. "Stay if you like," he said, "but I'll make a scene if you do." And as she talked to her husband, Anna Pavlovna looked thinner, older, plainer, pale, biting her lips, and almost crying. She went out to the entry and began putting on her things. "You're not going?" asked the ladies in surprise. "Anna Pavlovna, you're not going, dear?" "Her head aches," said the tax collector for his wife. Coming out of the club, the husband and wife walked all the way home in silence. The tax collector walked behind his wife, and watching her downcast, sorrowful, humiliated little figure, he recalled the look of beatitude which had so irritated him at the club, and the consciousness that the beatitude was gone filled his soul with triumph. He was pleased and satisfied, and at the same time he felt the lack of something. He would have liked to go back to the club and make everyone feel dreary and miserable, so that all might know how stale and worthless life is when you walk along the streets in the dark and hear the slush of the mud under your feet, and when you know that you will wake up next morning with nothing to look forward to but vodka and cards. Oh, how awful it is! And Anna Pavlovna could scarcely walk. She was still under the influence of the dancing, the music, the talk, the lights, and the noise. She asked herself as she walked along why God had thus afflicted her. She felt miserable, insulted, and choking with hate as she listened to her husband's heavy footsteps. She was silent, trying to think of the most offensive, biting, and venomous word she could hurl at her husband, and at the same time she was fully aware that no word could penetrate her tax collector's hide. What did he care for words? Her bitterest enemy could not have contrived for her a more helpless position. And meanwhile the band was playing, and the darkness was full of the most rousing, intoxicating dance tunes. End of The Husband by Anton Chekhov. Read by Bill Mosley.
Indiscretion by Guy D. Maupassant. From the entire original Maupassant short stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. read by Double Mirrors. Indiscretion. They had loved each other before marriage with a pure and lofty love. They had first met on the seashore. He had thought this young girl charming as she passed by with her light-coloured parasol and her dainty dress, amid the marine landscape against the horizon. He had loved her, blonde and slender, in these surroundings of blue and ocean and spacious sky. He could not distinguish the tenderness which this budding woman awoke in him from the vague and powerful emotion which the fresh salt air and the grand scenery of surf and sunshine and waves aroused in his soul. She, on the other hand, had loved him because he had courted her, because he was young, rich, kind, and attentive. She had loved him because it is natural for young girls to love men who whisper sweet nothings to them. So for 3 months they had lived side by side and hand in hand. The greeting which they exchanged in the morning before the bath, in the freshness of the morning, or in the evening on the sand, under the stars, and the warmth of a calm night, whispered low, very low, already had the flavour of kisses, though their lips had never met. Each dreamed of the other at night, each thought of the other on waking, and without yet having voiced their sentiments, each longed for the other, body and soul. After marriage their loves descended to earth. It was at first a tireless, sensuous passion, then exalted tenderness, composed of tangible poetry, more refined caresses, and new and foolish inventions. Every glance and gesture was an expression of passion. But little by little, without even noticing it, they began to get tired of each other. Love was still strong, but they had nothing more to reveal to each other, nothing more to learn from each other. No new tale of endearment, no unexpected outburst, no new way of expressing the well-worn, oft-repeated verb. They tried, however, to rekindle the dwindling flame of the first love. Every day they tried some new trick or desperate attempt to bring back to their hearts the uncooled ardour of their first days of married life. They tried moonlit walks under the trees, in the warmth of the summer evenings, the poetry of mist-covered beaches, the excitement of public festivals. One morning Henriette said to Paul, "Will you take me to the cafe for dinner?" "Certainly, dearie." "To some well-known cafe?" "Of course." He looked at her with a questioning glance, seeing that she was thinking something which she did not wish to tell. She went on, "You know, one of those cafes. Oh, how can I explain myself? A sporty cafe." He smiled. "Of course, I understand. You mean in one of the cafes which are commonly called Bohemian?" "Yes, that's it. But take me to one of the big places. One where you are known, one where you have already supped no, dined, well, you know, I never dare say it." "Go ahead, dearie, little secrets should no longer exist between us." "No, I dare not." "Go on, don't be prudish. Tell me." "Well, I want to be taken for your sweetheart, there. And I want the boys who do not know that you are married to take me for such, and you too. I want you to think that I am your sweetheart for 1 hour in that place which must hold so many memories for you. There. And I will play that I am your sweetheart. It's awful, I know. I am abominably ashamed. I am as red as a peony. Don't look at me." He laughed, greatly amused, and answered, "All right. We'll go tonight to that very swell place where I am well known." Towards 7 o'clock they went up the stairs of one of the big cafes on the boulevard, he smiling with the look of a conqueror, she timid, veiled, and delighted. They were immediately shown to one of the luxurious private dining rooms, furnished with 4 large armchairs and a red plush couch. The head waiter entered and brought them the menu. Paul handed it to his wife. "What do you want to eat?" "I don't care. Order whatever is good." After handing his coat to the waiter, he ordered dinner and champagne. The waiter looked at the young woman and smiled. He took the order and murmured, "Will Monsieur Paul have his champagne sweet or dry?" "Dry, very dry." Henriette was pleased to hear that this man knew her husband's name. They sat on the couch side by side and began to eat. 10 candles lighted the room and were reflected in all the mirrors around them, which seemed to increase the brilliancy 1,000-fold. Henriette drank glass after glass in order to keep up her courage, although she felt dizzy after the first few glasses. Paul, excited by the memories which returned to him, kept kissing his wife's hands. His eyes were sparkling. She was feeling strangely excited in this new place, restless, pleased, a little guilty, but full of life. 2 waiters, serious, silent, accustomed to seeing and forgetting everything, to entering the room only when it was necessary, and to leaving it when they felt they were intruding, were silently flitting hither and thither. Towards the middle of the dinner, Henriette was well under the influence of champagne. She was prattling along fearlessly, her cheeks flushed, her eyes glistening. "Come, Paul, tell me everything." "What, sweetheart?" "I don't dare tell you." "Go on." "Have you loved many women before me?" He hesitated, a little perplexed, not knowing whether he should hide his adventures or boast of them. She continued, "Oh, please tell me, how many have you loved?" "A few." "How many?" "I don't know. How do you expect me to know such things?" "Haven't you counted them?" "Of course not." "Then you must have loved a good many." "Perhaps." "About how many? Just tell me how many." "But I don't know, dearest. Some years a good many, and some years only a few." "How many a year did you say?" "Sometimes 20 or 30, sometimes only 4 or 5. "Oh! That makes more than 100 in all." "Yes, just about." "Oh, I think that is dreadful." "Why dreadful?" "Because it's dreadful when you think of it, all those women, and always the same thing. Oh, it's dreadful. Just the same, more than 100 women." He was surprised that she should think that dreadful, and answered with that air of superiority which men take with women when they wish to make them understand that they have said something foolish. "That's funny. If it is dreadful to have 100 women, it is dreadful to have one." "Oh no, not at all." "Why not?" "Because with one woman you can have a real bond of love which attaches you to her, while with 100 women it's not the same at all. There is no real love. I don't understand how a man can associate with such women." "But they are all right." "No, they can't be." "Yes, they are." "Oh, stop, you disgust me." "But then, why did you ask me how many sweethearts I had had?" "Because—" "That's no reason." "What were they? Actresses, little shop girls, or society women?" "A few of each." "It must have been rather monotonous towards the last." "Oh no, it's amusing to change." She remained thoughtful, staring at her champagne glass. It was full. She drank it in one gulp, then putting it back on the table, she threw her arms around her husband's neck and murmured in his ear, "Oh, how I love you, sweetheart, how I love you." He threw his arms around her in a passionate embrace. A waiter, who was just entering, backed out, closing the door discreetly. In about 5 minutes the head waiter came back, solemn and dignified, bringing the fruit for dessert. She was once more holding between her fingers a full glass, and gazing into the amber liquid as though seeing unknown things. She murmured in a dreamy voice, "Yes, it must be fun." End of Indiscretion by Guy D. Maupassant.